Ladies and gentlemen, you asked for a Halo trickshot video like this after the last video I did about Halo physics, and my god, do I have an awesome video planned for you today. You don't know how excited I was to put this together for you guys. To find a new idea and then be able to execute it is, to me, peak Halo. Halo 2 turns 20 years old this year, one of the most influential and special Halo games, and to mark the occasion, we are doing the mother of all Halo launches. So after my last Halo video, where I spoke about the physics, you guys said you'd like me to create more Halo trick shots, but the trouble is finding something that's unique and interesting. I did so many in the lead up to Halo Infinite, I covered mostly everything. And then randomly, one night, in the back of my mind, something said to me, Remy, hop on Halo MCC, load up Halo 2, and pick Delta Halo. It was the weirdest thing. I had a few hours spare, so I loaded up the level. Now when I go for Halo trick shots, I think of game mechanics. What can I do out of the ordinary to try break the original programming Bungie coded into the levels? Whether it be the physics, the scripting, or the enemies themselves, there's so many unique things to do on Halo. Once I loaded Delta Halo up, I immediately thought of load zones, which raises the question, what are load zones? Well, in Halo, to use less memory, as you progress through the level, one load zone will deload, another one will load. Often you'll walk through hallways or enclosed areas, so you can't actually see anything loading. The trick here is because you can get out of Delta Halo very early on in the level, a lot of the scripted triggers will be skipped. Scripted triggers, for example, are the Pelican coming in to drop off vehicles, certain enemies spawning in that protect the bridge, and so on. So upon my first time playing, I broke out of Delta Halo and walked all the way over to the load zone trigger, which is at the end of the level. Here is what the map looks like upon hitting the load zones before and after. As you can see, the first area you land in is completely removed and the end of the level is added. I then got out of the map again and was curious as to what would happen if I tried to complete the level normally. Upon returning back to the start of the level, and you can tell you're in the right location by swapping to the anniversary graphics, to my amazement, some of the enemies actually spawned in. What blew my mind even more is that even the scripted Pelican and Phantom triggers still functioned. Upon defeating both waves of Phantoms as normal, the Pelicans actually flew in to drop off the Wardog, and look what I discovered. The brand new cliff that appears due to the deload actually breaks the Pelican flying script, and it starts to do very unintended things. The Pelican will literally fly off over the cliffs and flip itself into oblivion. It also flings the Marines out of the Pelican, and it can be flipped and spun around. Discovering this made me feel like a kid again, breaking out of Delta Halo for the very first time. I was stoked, as I knew I could launch myself off of the Pelican just like you can with the Phantom on the level Metropolis. This raises the question, how am I going to launch from the beginning of the level to Regret's Temple? Well, there's a few options. I tried first of all by launching the player, but this didn't go anywhere near as far as I wanted. I then figured, what about a vehicle? We have three options: a Ghost, a Warthog, and a Scorpion. By far the hardest and probably the most visually appealing one would be the tank. Imagine getting a tank all the way into the middle of the lake, sitting on the end of the next level. So I decided that was my plan. With the trickshot idea in mind, I set out to get the Scorpion into position for the Pelican to hit it. This is trickier than you would think, because when you hit that load zone to deload the first area, if you aren't in the Scorpion when you hit that load zone, it will completely disappear. Exactly like the Banshee on Metropolis when you're trying to get the Scarab gun. That means we have to get the Scorpion into this passageway, get the Scorpion out of the area again without reloading the first part of the level, and then into the correct location to launch the vehicle to the temple. So first of all, I restart the level and I immediately jump out of the map. We don't want to hit the triggers that will bring in the Phantoms, so we progress to the first area where you get the Scorpion itself. We clear the area and activate the bridge, which triggers Johnson to come and drop off the tank. Then we need to get the tank outside of the level itself. I thought this would be a lot harder than it was, but I was amazed at just how vertical the Scorpion will climb. It's honestly like one of those horses from Skyrim walking up the cliff. After getting the tank out, we drive all the way to the load zone area. This takes a while and is very annoying. Checkpoints are key here, and there's a timed one after about 10 minutes of getting the Scorpion, so you want to be in position by the time it triggers, so you get some decent attempts at getting the tank into the load zone. I first tried hanging the tank off of the cliff to try and hit the load zone. Unfortunately, the only time it would actually trigger was when the tank fell all the way in, but then the tank was stuck, there was no way to get it back onto the cliff and to the starting area where the pelican was. So then I messaged one of my friends, Hark, who knows a lot about Halo tricking. This is when I discovered that this trick had been done 12 years ago, and I was completely shocked that I had discovered the same thing just by playing around with the mission. This is when skulls came into play, mainly the Sputnik skull, which increases the physics of explosions, which allows you to send vehicles very far that you've seen in my previous videos. To my surprise, the Scorpion actually has knockback with the Sputnik skull enabled. The strategy is so damn nerdy, but I know you guys will love it. To hit the load zone trigger, you drop the Scorpion off of the cliff, gun facing down. As you hit the load zone, you start firing the tank cannon to knock yourself back up while holding reverse. This was a major piece of the puzzle out of the way, and I was so excited to think I might actually be able to pull this off. At this point, on my drive back to the start of the level, I was like, okay, how am I actually going to survive the pelican hitting the tank and then surviving the launch itself? My answer to this was the Black Eye and the Acrophobia skulls. Black Eye gives you double overshields, allowing you to take so much more damage than usual, and the Acrophobia skull makes it so when you're flying in a vehicle, you won't die to the fall timer, which is roughly 4 seconds. Once I reached the starting level with the Scorpion, and again, you can swap to anniversary graphics to know you're in the right spot, I put the Scorpion roughly where I thought the pelican would hit it, then I walked to the trigger to spawn the phantoms so they'll drop the enemies, and I used those enemies to get full overshields for the launch itself. The best thing about this is upon killing the final enemy and the pelicans loading in, you get a checkpoint. This means you can set up the Scorpion in different locations every time if it's not accurate. Upon the final grunt dying here is one of our first attempts at the launch. I immediately saw this was going to be so much harder than I originally thought. When I go for Halo trick shots, I try to have the same consistent outcome over and over, and then from there, I slightly tweak the positioning and the timing to get the desired outcome. This one seemed completely random. Not only was the tank on a ledge, so if you try to slightly move it to one side, it completely affects where the Scorpion goes. In some circumstances, you'll Beyblade completely the different way. After 3 days of straight attempts, I messaged another guy named Shiltshow. He's been doing Halo trick shots too, and he confirmed my suspicions that this was absolute hell. After constantly setting up the trick in different spots, different angles, I found one particular setup had promise. Multiple times I went above or to the side of the temple, but the height was proving tricky. I kept flying too high, which meant I needed to get hit further back, so I actually landed at the appropriate height for the platform. Schilt suggested that I turn the Scorpion around and drive straight into the pelican. Upon this change of strategy, I found that driving front on into the pelican gave more random outcomes. The previous way, if I turned and looked into a certain spot, I'd at least go towards the temple. Over and over, I got so close that after 5 days, I was really wondering, is this ever going to happen? And then, after a close attempt, this happened.
Oh, please let this begin! It looks good! It looks very good! Yes! Yes! Oh, I did it! I did it!
It's safe to say I was excited. I think more excited than a Halo Killionaire. A plan that I had actually worked, and it couldn't have landed better. Middle of the temple, landing right in the middle of the platform. To launch a Scorpion to the end of the other level, where you fight the Prophet of Regret. I think only one other person has done it in Halo history. I was so damn excited. So excited, in fact, that as a little bonus, I lured an elite to the top of the final part of Delta Halo, and then used him as target practice to take him out as well. This was by far one of the most technically challenging clips I'd ever gone for, but I was so glad to pull it off. If you enjoyed this type of video, leave me a like. If you want to see more of it, let me know. If it performs well, then I'll see what else I can cook up. Being creative on Halo is my favorite thing to do, so to say I'm satisfied is an understatement. With that said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.